Now, speaking of Americana, the troops, rah, rah, national anthem. This from Fox News this morning. The Army sent a letter to former service members. And thank you to Patrick just tagging me on Twitter with this story. The Army sent a letter to former service members dismissed for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine, informing them that they can request corrections of their discharge records as the military branch reportedly struggles with recruitment 3 years after the onset of the pandemic. The letter was addressed to former service members and notified of new Army guidance regarding the correction of military records for former members of the Army following the removal of the COVID-19 vaccine requirement. Before I go any further, this is infuriating. This administration willingly fired people who were willing to die for our country because they didn't get the stupid COVID shot. The COVID shot that we knew pretty quickly did not prevent transmission of the disease. Now, if you are an older person and you were at higher risk for COVID, if you were diabetic, if you were somebody who, had a pre-existing condition, I was never sitting here telling anybody what to do. I wasn't. And I say it as someone who got it the first time around. So, I lay it all out there. I got it the first time around. I would never get one again. We know, my doctor, and I don't have some kook doctor, but he was like, hey, young, healthy men, no need for it. So I'm not getting it again. Sorry. Not sorry. But by the time the government was doing this to people, we knew what was going on. We knew that it was not going to be something that was going to prevent transmission of COVID. We had men and women who were willing to die, who signed up to put their lives on the line for this country. They put their families through the ringer. They deploy, they come back, they deploy, they come back. And we told these people that they were not good enough to serve their nation because they wouldn't take this stupid shot. This is one of the many things from the last 3 years that we cannot forget. The stupidity of our public policy on this and so many other things. But it's just infuriating. And, of course, I'm going to put out the little PSA. Talk to your doctor. I'm not here to tell you what to do with the COVID shot. Thanks. All right. Do that on your own time. Figure out what you want to do. But, gosh, this just riles me up. We all know somebody. I remember talking about this when it was happening, and we had some of you call in saying that your children, your sons, your daughters were being let go from the military because they weren't getting the shot. And now suddenly the government's coming back to them, the Army's coming back to them with their tail between their legs like a pathetic bunch of losers, saying, hey, by the way, we'll clear your record and come on back because, they're never going to say that we're wrong, but we really need some bodies in here, and we'd love to have you back on board. Young, healthy men, and yes, some women. But we know it's obviously geared more towards men. And don't worry about that whole pesky COVID shot thing. Is anybody going to, pay a price for any of this? Anyone? Is there ever going to be a person who's going to be held responsible for this kind of nonsense and these kind of policies? And don't forget, the same people in charge right now are the ones who tried to force a COVID requirement on corporate America, on private sector businesses. An Army spokesperson did confirm the authenticity of this letter to Fox News. The letter also states, as a result of the dropping of the current COVID vaccine requirements, former soldiers who were involuntarily separated for refusal to receive the COVID-19 vaccination may request a correction of their military records from either or both the Army Discharge Review Board or the Army Board for Correction of Military Records. there's a lot of military folks in this audience. Are people going to go back? Do you know people who are going to go back? Or are they going to say, screw it? I'm done. I'm over it. I sacrificed for this country, and this is how they rewarded me. By telling me to take a hike over a COVID shot that wasn't preventing transmission, and that became obvious very quickly. They're having a tough time recruiting, and they're saying to troops that they dismissed for refusing the COVID vaccine, you're welcome to come back. Do you think any will? And is anybody going to pay a price for this kind of dopey policy that was unscientific, that was politically motivated, and now results in this country being less safe? I mean, we're less safe in a lot of ways than we were 4 years ago. We're less safe on the world stage in the obvious ways. China's emboldened, Iran, Russia, we know what's going on there. We're less safe when it comes to our open borders. We are less safe with a shrinking military. We are less safe with $34 trillion in debt. Every part of this country, economically, foreign policy-wise, open borders, all of it, less safe, less secure than 3 to 4 years ago. Indisputable. I don't care who you voted for. That's a fact. And now they're begging guys to come back to the Army and gals to come back to the Army who refused the shot, which is just insane. I mean, it's not insane they're asking them back. They're desperate. But it's pretty pathetic when you think about it. 913-408-7957. Peter's in Kansas City. What's up, Peter?
Well, I want to ask you a question, actually. I have a couple questions for you. But first, which orders do you believe that service people should be allowed to disobey if they don't feel that they're politically aligned with them? Like, when should that be okay?
Well, it doesn't really matter. My point is not that people got let go for disobeying. I understand that you have to have rules. My point is that it was a dumb rule.
Well, no, if prior to that, had they not gotten their measles vaccine, would they have been kicked out for that? I believe they would have. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for you to confirm that for me.
Well, yeah, I believe so, too, without having it right in front of me. But once again, that's completely different than something experimental that was not doing what it was intended to do.
Yeah, I guess the way that, I've never been in the military, so I can't say. My grandfather was, and we talked about it a lot. And I feel like, one of the underlying spirits of the military is that it isn't really about you, guy. It's about your unit. It's about the mission. It's about the people around you. And if you want to believe that there are, little robots in the vaccine, then you're free to believe that. And you can talk about it all you want. But when it comes to the part where you may endanger the safety of the men and women around you, we're not going to have that. And I think
Peter, that was my point. No one who wasn't taking. You're right. Was there a portion of people who thought there were little trackers and robots in the vaccine? Yes. But that's completely disrespectful and out of line to say that the bulk of the people who didn't take the shot did it because they thought they were getting injected with robots. Don't be ridiculous.
To be fair, I've never had a real conversation with someone who's felt that way. So the only exposure I have to those kind of opinions are the extreme ones. So, if I was being unfair,
but where? Like, because you see stuff on the internet? Like, Peter, you got to get out. I'm glad you called. We're having a great conversation. We're having a great conversation. I appreciate you doing it. But listen, man, the people the bulk of the people that didn't take it because they thought they were going to get injected with chips. They didn't take it because they had, concerns on their end regarding whether or not it was safe for them. And we now know that young men in particular have had some bad reactions to it. Fair?
Okay. It sounds more fair when you say it that way. I can accept that.
All right. Well, that's good, man. And I hope you'll hang around. We appreciate you checking in.
For sure.
All right. There you go. Peter in Kansas City. Good stuff. Appreciate him calling the show. But, that is – and listen, I'm happy to be the vessel for a guy like Peter to talk to folks who have questioned the value of the COVID vax. What he, I'm sure, is referring to is some of the crazy stuff he would see on social media, right? Oh, yeah, Bob, old Bob boy, he didn't take the vax because he's not going to let the government track him, the government, right? GUBMINT. We all know those. It's fine. But regular people all over America We're like, was this in my best interest? Especially if it remains experimental. Let's not forget that nobody is held accountable for it. The companies who made it have immunity from it. You can't sue them. And then on top of that, we're now being told, hey, especially young men, probably not in your best interests. We got a lot of things that are coming out of this that we're still unsure about. And it's not even doing what it was intended to do, prevent transmission. So like when Peter says about the military, hey, it's not about you, man, it's about the group. That is true if it had prevented transmission, which it was not doing, and that became obvious pretty early. It may have reduced your ability to get really sick, but even that, a little debatable, depending on how old you are, your pre-existing conditions, and all those different things as well. Calvin's in Olathe. Calvin, I got a minute. Go ahead, my man.
Okay, Peter was right about one thing. He was never in the military. I was. I do not have the vaccination, but I'm going to go into history. Patton had to apologize for slapping a soldier. For this end, I think the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, and the current Defense Secretary, Austin, should have to publicly apologize, admit they were wrong. And when I say a public, I mean in front of a massive number of troops and people they discharged. They have to admit they were wrong. That's what the military does. And then they have to ask for a forgiveness.
That would be a great place to start, Calvin. Thank you very much. I would like that a lot. Rick in Lafayette County. Rick, what do you got for me, my man?
Hey, Pete, I think they ought to reinstate them if they want to come back, give them full credit for seniority from the time they were released, and give them full back pay if they want to come back. I think that would be a good starting point.
I think that would actually entice folks. You're right. If they did full back pay for time missed, if they were, let's say, blown out in 2021, suddenly you got a couple of years of back pay to boot. That might actually be what they have to do to get this thing done.
All right.
That's good, Rick. They got to put their money where their mouth is instead of doing this whole little dog and pony show of, oh, we're so sorry. Oh, boy, wish it didn't go down that way. You want to come back? You want your old gig back? Sure, a lot of these people, by the way, are in the private sector and doing pretty well. How many of them are going to go back? I don't know how many have just been sitting around for the last 2 years.